Hi, everyone, and welcome. We're going to get started. I'll let people in as I see them. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm Jessica. I'm with Literary Arts. If you're here for a reading, sorry, I'm like letting people in at the same time. If you're here for a reading with Paul J. Pastor and Joe Wilkins, you're in the right place. We're about to get started. Welcome, welcome. And before we get started, I just want to open up the space with a land acknowledgement. Literary Arts is based in Portland, Oregon, and we are currently on unceded land. The Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Tumwater, Wallala bands, the Tualatin Kalpuya, and many other indigenous nations of the Columbia River occupied and operated on this land long before Western colonizers arrived, and many continue to do so today. Despite attempts of removal and erasure, these communities remain a strong and vital part of our future. Literary Arts recognizes that this acknowledgement is only a small step in affirming the ongoing presence and contributions of our Native communities, and we commit to engaging these communities more fully as we fulfill our mission. For those of you who are new to Literary Arts, we are a nonprofit community-based arts organization with a 37-year history of serving readers and writers. Our mission is to engage readers, support writers, and to inspire the next generation with great literature. Our programs include Portland Arts and Lectures, programs for youth, the Oregon Book Awards and Fellowship Program, and the Portland Book Festival. We also offer reader seminars, writing classes, and free literary events like this one year-round. I invite you all to check us out over at literary-arts.org. Now I'm going to introduce our readers. Paul J. Pastor is a poet, author, and editor. His creative work has been featured or is forthcoming at the Windhover, Ecstasis, Solum Literary Press, Fathom, and other fine outlets, and has been anthologized by the New York Quarterly Review. His books include Bower Lodge and The Face of the Deep. Joe Wilkins is the author of a novel, Fall Back Down When I Die, and a memoir, The Mountain and the Fathers. He has published 4 poetry collections, including Thieve and When We Were Birds, winner of the 2017 Oregon Book Award in Poetry. He lives with his family in McMinnville. Thank you both for being here. So excited to hear you.
Such a pleasure to be here tonight, Jessica. Thank you for hosting.
Yeah, thanks so much. Paul, you want to take it away? We kind of talked a little bit about doing a kind of handing off of the reading a little bit before everyone jumped on.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's see what arises tonight as we engage the work and get going. Everybody, thank you for being here. We recognize that there's a lot going on in lives today, and while we wish that we could gather in person, obviously, what a pleasure to welcome people from all across this land here. I'll be reading tonight from my debut poetry collection, Bower Lodge, released by Oregon's own Fernwood Press, based in beautiful Newburgh, Oregon. It's a themed collection, and if you happen to get it, you will recognize as you progress through the collection that there are several images that are developing and percolating as it goes, and multiple themes that I am working through in more than one poem. And one of the big themes that you'll encounter is this idea that often what's underground or underfoot or trampled on or not recognized is what is most real or most valuable. I think of the beautiful land acknowledgement that we just heard from Jessica, and of the many stories that unknowingly we walk across every day just by virtue of living here. And that is much in the spirit of what I'm working towards in this collection, because I believe that the same thing happens in our lives, that many of the stories that define us are often walked over unrecognized. So with that in mind, I'll read a couple of poems from the beginning of the collection on that theme, and then pass it over for a little work from Joe. It's the opening poem of the book, and it's titled, And So Under. You are not only what is seen. You are like what happens when a desert shifted in a lost land, like a pyramid long swallowed by fine sand. Yes, A wanderer comes, finds your utmost tip, bleached like a horse tooth, kicks you gently, thinks, weird rock, walks off, whistling. But underfoot, you lie entire, walls preserved by darkness, chambers opening on chambers, passages on passages, painted with the tales you imagined as a child. Your cunning slits aligned with summer stars, all raised up on the high, far day that you were made, each awaiting the earth's deep wind, the uncovering that will reveal, reclaim, remember, the festival of your forgotten name, the restoration of your unremembered crown. The second poem, this one's titled Leatherfoot. Two options. One, to go always in shoes, buying and buying them, wearing and wearing them out, hurting less, knowing less, being shod, nor can foot feel, or be your own shoon, so to say. I mean, let callus pack and marble lushly, brown with your color and the earth's, go on gravels or on carpets just so, nervy, curling, cold some, split some, whorled and knotted, but with 10 toes feeling, leaving prints, no other leaves, unsafe, unnumb. Joe, you want to do a couple?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for those, Paul. And I love how you introduce those, speaking about the stories that are sort of all around us, even if we might not recognize them or be cognizant of them in all moments. And as you were saying that, I was trying to catch think of a couple of poems that might speak to some of those same ideas. And so I'm going to read two poems here from Thieve, my latest book. Very different poems. And the first one's called Mercy. And I don't know if you ever played this at recess when you were a kid, but that game where you'd grab somebody's hands and, try to wrench them over. And well, yeah, so that's where the title comes from, as well as other things. So it's called Mercy. Duck Benson every day lined us up out on the gravel recess yard. He stood so close you could smell, as your turn came, the grease and cinnamon on his breath. Duck laced his fingers with yours. He counted down. The object of his game was to break your wrists, to turn and wrench until you cried mercy. And we all of us did, some only turning red, others fighting back tears, a few falling to their knees. Mercy, we begged, of the twitchy, dirty jean deity who was Duck Benson. Mercy, mercy. 3 years older, but still in our same grade, Duck was missing his left thumb. A barbed wire scar laddered his neck. 30 years on, I rise from the garden, rinse with hose water each of my unblemished hands. Late afternoon and beyond the fence, I hear them cursing, kicking windfall plums, the usual slouching pack of boys that plagues this or any neighborhood, the two big ones, the fidgety ones, the ones with their hands always on their friends. I want to line them up and teach them how to ask. What I want for each terrified one and all of us is some assurance that God and the world are as good as Duck Benson, that after the pain, after the breaking, it will be as it was, granted. And then this one, again, think about stories and the ways they're intertwined or the ways they're underneath, buoying us and buffeting us potentially at times. This is another poem. I hope that's kind of doing some stuff like that. It's called In His Previous Life as a Camas Lily. He sighed each April upward, his steady virescent journey one among the others. A modest rising, casually miraculous, Beneath the hand of the rain, he leaned upon his axis and often leaned so far as to kiss with tender floral primordia the funky black bugshot loam. Though supple as he was, he did not bruise nor break, no, not even in the wind, which came some days screaming down the mountain and took the limbs of muscled oaks and twisted them to splinters. It's true, it went mostly unnoticed. Work, which was to rise simple, green, and thin, and go one sunny day wildly blue. To be loved then by moths and mason bees, to shake finally and to scatter, to urge every sugar to the root, to feed the earth as it fed him. He knew this. He knew his creek bank. He was everything he loved. They gouged one day a road, and like the others, he was unearthed, was left to rot along the verge. The wind lifted up the stench, carried it down the creek, up a river. The girl who breathed it frowned, breathed again, and years later became the boy's mother. She took him, as was her wont, to creeks and rivers, where he knew only that he should dig, work the creek mud with his bare toes, that he should rise and face the water, bees and flies darting at the blue of his eyes.
Beautiful. Joe, this is why you're one of my favorite poets. I'm speechless. It's just gorgeous. To follow up on that, as if one could, I want to read a poem that I believe ends precisely as Mercy did. Mercy ended with the single word granted, right? It did. This does too. So wait for it, but it's cracking me up. It must be done. It was meant. It's called Mill Pond, and it comes from my boyhood here in Oregon. And the experience of that many of us might share of going out into the woods and finding signs that we are not the first ones to walk in those woods. Yeah, I'll just call it as it is, Mill Pond. An even mile round the rim, slit with sluices, locks and flumes, each notch unaccountable, tippling down abandoned water. The mill's rough husks shadow and brown the rushes, lay leaning angles. Cement temples tuned to unfashionable constellations. It is the granted things we cannot comprehend. The child on a mountain cannot see the mountain. Now over this whole scene lay the old photograph. See the mill regain its roofline. Over lanky men who stood in denim on the bobbing logs, rolled cinematically with peaveys, laughed when greenhorns wet their heavy boots, or better, thumped their nuts against the trunks of a common horizontal forest. In flannel hats, the men plump the sluices, leap locks, jumble on the flumes, shaking with the hungers of an adolescent nation, lovely and offensive in their pimpled industry. Walking lolling water, stepped log to infinite hopped log. More board feet passed through here than any other pond in America, or so Bill Yo coughs from a frayed lawn chair. Fine. Now silent as regrowing forests, the pond waits. What sinks will float. Affection. Children on the mountain cannot see the mountain. Granted. And another significant theme of this collection is the idea of darkness as a needed counterpoint for light. This is titled 9 Kinds of Blindness. It's a bit of an unusual poem for me, the list poem. Anyway, I'll just read it. 9 kinds of blindness. 1, the one where your eyes do not work to see anything. 2, the one where your eyes do not work to see everything. 3, the one where your eyes work, but you cannot see what you have never seen before. 4, the one where your eyes work, but you cannot see what is inconvenient. 5, the one where your eyes work, but someone is keeping you from using them. 6, the one where your eyes work, but you are angry. 7, the one where your eyes work, but you are afraid. 8, the one where your eyes work, but there is no light. 9. The one where your eyes work, but there is nothing but light. And because they're on the shorter side, I think I'll add a third to this grouping here. This is titled The Roof Slants, so the water pours this way. Do you think the world might share a common secret grief for which we have no words? As if each patch of lichen, every dog, and even the black cormorants who roll their long dives all know the bald ache we swallow? Do we all go from same evenings to same mornings? Sleepwalkers, sighing drunks, as if we'll know the face to rouse us only as it passes, stalking back to where this started. We apes with steeple fingers, we who pray and row in seamen, we composers of the bone hymn by those little swirling tide pools on the coast.
Those are lovely, Paul. Goodness, thank you. I've got two, I think, that I hope keep the conversation going here. In the first one, thinking about the physicality and the intensity of this place, Mill Pond, I've got a poem of work, and it kind of takes the form from me trying to explain to my children the kind of work I did as a boy and a young man growing up in eastern Montana during harvest season. And there's a number of these poems throughout the book that all begin with the word explain and then something, right? I'm always trying to explain things to my children. When they were younger, they listened to everything I had to explain. And now they're a little older, they listen to some of what I have to say. But this is called Explain Harvest. And that was when the last stars were ghosts. In the far hills, dawn haunted ghosts. And we too were ghosts, hauling grease guns and canteens, clink of ice, snap of cut stalks, and the 6-note songs of meadowlarks clear and good to hear in the half-light. That was when grain trucks as old as grandfathers farted and sparked, and bachelor neighbors crawled out of the bold mountains with twists in their dark beards, and each day began with the knock of the straw walker, the thresher's metal howl. That was when there were jack pines, sagebrush, the bleached refractory yellows of prairie sunflower, yarrow foundering in the wind. Gravel roads were gods then, and carried you and 10 tons of winter wheat up creekless cut banks and over alkali wasted flats and past that fenced square of slumped headstones at Lemonade Springs, which wasn't sweet or sour but dry as the dust that lifted as you by and settled on your lips. That was when bad luck snapped a belt, sheared a bolt, barked your knuckles to the bloody quick, and you closed your eyes to hear all the better the boss's coming storm of furious and lovely curse words. The wind was a gift. Cloud shadow, a consecration, your own back, a slab of sanctified stone you could set against most any goddamn thing and heave. At sundown, the combines coughed to a stop, and the boss's wife showed up with a half rack of warm Rainier, and in the silence, in the blackening night, you all stood around, stars of pain rising in your wrists, the butterfly muscles beneath the eye. It was when there was a second skin of dust and chaff, though you were every night too tired to wash, and so fell to bed to dream yourself clean, dream yourself into another, kinder life. And now there is another life. And I am telling you, child, there is only one good luck, and that's to choose your own gods and ghosts, your own excruciating stars. And a poem, I'm thinking about that idea of light and dark and the ways that the dark sometimes allows us to see. And I want to, my kids are here too. I kind of want to give them co-writing credits on this one. Again, especially when they were younger, they would play these big imaginative pretend games, right? And it was that word that had the magic, pretend. As soon as you said pretend, it was real, right? Pretend this and that, and this, whatever this was fact now. And they would just follow this for a while. So this poem's called The World in Which You Live Just as It Is. Pretend we're brown horses with white like this on our noses. Pretend the wind catches only just our tails behind us. Pretend we're sister and brother and we love one another. And for lunch, there's grass and crackers, and in the field, all the flowers. Red, yellow, and there are blue ones too, but don't eat those. They're poison. Pretend we smell wolves. Pretend we are wolves. And when we howl, all the horses run except the littlest one. So we lick her on her white nose, and we're all friends on a mountain chewing flowers. But then I die, and like this, with leaves and sticks, you bury me, and you are so, so sad, and so am I. And here come the horses with their big hooves to pound the dirt down. I have a house now, underground. Do you miss me? Down here, I get so hungry. Pretend, bring me one more mouthful of flowers. And I'll pass it back over to you, Paul.
Wow, I want to sit with that one for a while. It's gorgeous. Let's keep up the theme of seeing. I like this a lot. This is called Herdesking Avenues. If you cannot see this city as expansive as a hive or a nest of nursing rattlesnakes, lightning bolts, gulls fallen from hornets dancing in the broad oak of the world. If you are insensible to how Herdesking Avenues mimic termite mounds and the warrens of lean hares and cliffside colonies of puffins, if you don't see the shadow of the kelp beds stretching over these buildings, or catch the sunlight through the carbon breath as if filtered through 20 meters of salt water, or note how the skyline drips upward like the lush stalagmites in a caverned limestone hush, then I don't think you'll see much when you walk this heavy earth, or listen if you're honored with some revelation. To the one with much, more, but the one who lacks will even lose his eyes. And keeping going in that imaginative theme, there's another piece called Sky for Miles. This is a very 2020 poem. Sky for miles. The fish of heaven swam to me and flipped his tail. Raw-boned, fleshed with contentment, scaled with notes from God's own whistling in the shower. And the fish said, "Why the long jaw?" And I was like, "You must have just got here." He hung lazy in the current of the breeze until I added, "Look around. I am in love, but my heart is not laughing. I sleep in little dribbles. Nothing tastes the same. The stars used to bloom like tulips. I thought once I could grow to multitudes. I have bad breath. I am either a happy ape or a sad angel. Things die. I may be losing my marbles. My tooth broke, then I swallowed it. I can't keep the counters clean. There are men with rifles everywhere. The fence posts are rotten. I think every week how glad I am my grandfather doesn't have to see this. If that is all, he said, then when do you think you'll get around to catching me? And I think I'll kick it back to you, Joe.
All right. Still thinking about seeing. Again, two very different poems. These are from my book, When We Were Birds, my previous book. And this first one's about a moment of seeing something in your everyday life that suddenly sends you elsewhere, right? And you're not even sure why. There's this little sudden connection or rhyme, so this is called With the Kisses of Many. The rain tore the morning like a shirt, like a shawl, any scrap we might use to keep the back raking weather off our backs. On the sidewalk, not leaves, but their rain-bled ghosts. Then a man with wires in his eyes, salt crash of snails beneath his shoes. Once, at a funeral for a girl I didn't know, I carried the broken body of God. Once, there was a boy I did know, his shoulders dimpled with the kisses of many, lit cigarettes. And here now, along the busy flood road's verge, rain slanting down and down, a woman waits to cross, her children so tight to her hip it is impossible to tell how many there are. And this is a very pre-pandemic poem, but it's a poem that was about a rather anxious time in our lives when we were waiting, when we were pregnant with our first. And I say we, but of course my wife was pregnant. I was with her during that time, and she's doing all this important biological work. So I was trying to write poems about the experience as if that was somehow would balance, right? And so I wrote a lot of these poems, all called Note to My Unborn Son. And so about things that I thought were important. So this is called Note to My Unborn Son concerning Canadian folk music. Working now around the great bulk of her belly, that blue-veined globe, blood-thrummed world of which we know and know so little. She sets the dimple of the Alvarez on her knee and with her water-swollen hand frets a Gordon Lightfoot tune, the one about the rain. Listen, little fish, I want to know, does Umphalos blood ring with a quiver of sheep gut strings? Do you bow down and rise up? The lone ocean of you storm against some placental sand. Is the voice of love wavery, waterlogged, beyond us always? With her mouth she sings an aching in my heart, my pockets full of sand.
Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. Well, one of the central themes of Bower Lodge is the Bower Lodge, which is this sort of conceptual space that's both tomb and womb. So riffing off of that beautiful poem, Joe, let's go towards that. It was inspired by a time in my life, and maybe some of you have experienced this as well, where it felt like a process of inward death transformation, like who I had been for the early portion of my life was being systematically taken apart, taken away from me, and then being reassembled and given back to me in a way that felt completely out of my hands, completely disorienting and quite uncomfortable, but ultimately beautiful. So this is the experience of approaching the Bower Lodge. Bower Lodge. You'll know the day has come because you fear it. The comfortable omens fail. The geese fly north in winter. Then will be the time to do your first great dying, to follow your familiar stranger into the house you dread. Set below the river that cares not if you love it, but flows away regardless, never twice the same. A little like your soul, this water that goes onward, elegant and simple, only what it is. And nothing more are you laid down within the bower. Here the lodge of death smells of smoke and salt. For the work of death is dying. Not many of us do it. We certainly expire, but death is not the same as expiration. It is a clarity of being, a last annunciation that starts again anew. So listen, die well in the bower of the river. Let it wash you of yourself, then treasure what is left. Your gift will be the greater when geese fly south in summer. You can call them to the river, for you will know your name. Another one here, extending a bit of that same theme. It's called Bird Sap. Bird sap. The alder's failing now and breaks heavy with the rain. The bark folds like the coat of a man who knows he'll no more need it. About its roots, fungus trumpets, reveling already, orange and red, orange and red, in shelves and tears and rondy cups like cauliflower ears. The flicker comes with black upon the throat to eat what plays below the bark. Yellow things, tan things, writhing black heads and bellies that pop, flailing things, half-made things who have no armor, whose mandibles protest, not yet, not yet. And in the flicker's craw, the flesh of grubs is taken, loved, and made into a paste. This rises like dough, is ground, digested. It is clarified like butter. When whole and pure, it flows into the genitals and poured into a little shell. So it is no coincidence that egg yolks shine like suns, for bird sap is the summer light from years ago, when the alder was ferocious and impregnable, when it stood against the coming of the winter, every leaf attentive to its light, before the fungus red and orange, and before the flicker with the black throat and the multiform infinite call. I wonder, when the alder slurped the earth, did it dream it would become a yellow glow suspended in an egg? With that image of transformation, I'll kick it back to you, my friend.
Those are both stunning. That line about now is the time for your first great dying. And I don't know if, I hope this is somehow connected here. But I thought of this poem as soon as I heard that line. This is just called Obad, and Obad is a poem of parting, lovers parting in the morning often, but I'm taking some license and messing with that a little bit. So this is Obad. I woke this morning in the old house, which sat at the far forsaken edge of more or less everything. Dry light rivering through uncurtained windows, larks in the cottonwoods, sallow barn cats eyeing the larks. The mill saws down Queen's Point working at a high blue whine. The dust of the road might wait a dozen years to rise, the ditch's throat never fill with ditch water. I wish a wind to touch the plains and valleys of me, all the old loves to leave me now and never leave. In this one, think about transformation and the transformations in my own life. I'm going to read this poem, and this is a poem riffing on a piece by the great Nikki Finney, and this is called Instructions for Poor White Country Boys Wishing to Be Poets. Be siphon, be shovel, be ditch magician, water here, water there. Be in the dirty water a spool of snakes essing off every which way. Or the greasy crease in your grandfather's slouch hat, the fly swatter snap in your mother's hot hand. Be 10 hours of back break, tamp and crank. Zert gun, cutter bar, come along, get down in the dirt and dig. Know you're getting, you'll never know quite where. Listen to Waylon and get weepy. What all else Emmy Lou will learn you. Carry in your pocket like your sausage finger daddy did, a pen. Dog-ear every page if you have to. Then reckon all your bad ancestors. Memorize the thank God stories otherwise. Thirsty, lucky you. You got the look of fence wire and trees to drink. But for all the boiled coffee and cigarettes, be careful when you kiss.
One country boy to another. I love it, Joe. It's beautiful. Wow. Well, Jessica, do we have time for a couple more each? What's our schedule here?
Yeah, I think we should do a couple more each, and then we'll have time for questions from the audience.
That's delightful.
Or from between the two of you even.
That's great. I love it. Okay, I think I'll read just a couple of more short ones from Bower Lodge, and then one piece of new work, since I know at least a couple of my friends here could be expecting that. Okay, this is called the Ashbreeze, and it is named after old slang about what would happen if your boat gets becalmed out at sea and there's no more wind, and you would ride the Ashbreeze, which was the fact that your oars were made of ash wood, and so you had to start pulling for the wind. The Ashbreeze. Tanagers are pairing in the hazel stand to twitch on errands to the fir line, then to alders who wet their feet along the windy lake. The males are bright as dahlias. Their mates are brown and dusky, like fir cones if fir cones grew black eyes and fell upward. It is a peaceable truce I've found with myself, watching tanagers pairing in the hazel stand. A moment to rest in these doldrums on the life map, when becalmed, the worst word for a windless agitation, you and I bend at our oars. Time to ride, you say, the Ashbreeze. And here we are again, I guess, within the blue horizon where water falls to sky, where no wind moves save that for which we pull. This is the latitude of sloshing prayers, where horses panic in the hold and dream of drowning in the sunken stables, where skeletons prance free of heavy skin to graze among the coral. Oars are wings now, I say, back from my daydream of tanagers, back where I cannot tell if we are moving as we bob and pull against the world's salt tears, as hoofbeats ring on boards below, as we learn no sailor knows his weight until he's had to row it. And then to kind of wrap up the Bower Lodge poems here with the true heart of the collection, which is very joyful. This is a piece called Joy, which I once called a bayonet. Joy, which I once called a bayonet, is sharpened by omissions. Last year, I walked out back to this one spot where indigo squirrels pong between green walnuts and black woods. There is a stone wall. There is a yellow creek that wets the boulders. There are denim darks of fir shadow, which should drown seedlings, but also there, in impossible cracks, lost hollows, and God's unaccountable brown logics, grow the plantings, a dozen little nut trees, each with a copper name, a treasure coiling oily roots, which lived by being lost, which live, which dawn and golden with good sheens, which dream of seeds to plump like wrinkled brains, which likely pray that each young ball will fall to fates like theirs, quite happily misplaced. The squirrels pinged everywhere, burying. And that idea that sometimes being lost is the best thing that can happen to you. All right, for my final piece, I'll read a piece of recent work here, which quite unusually for me, commits the contemporary crime of rhyming. So apologies in advance. It's called Hair Shirt, and it's about the experience of walking on a Northwest beach and picking up a whole hell of a lot of plastic. A hair shirt, if you don't know, it was in medieval times worn by certain religious people to inflict discomfort. It was a very rough, coarse material worn against your skin during a time of fasting or penance. Hair shirt. I wove it of the dreamy plastic ropes whose neon braids fluoresce the downy beach. And through the strands, I spackled it with caps of bottles and sharp languages, faded, each with variegated shotgun shells, tight tied, emptied reds by flaccid zipping bags of baby vodka bottles, labeled Western Sun, lemon, knocking sand onto my legs. My sleeves, crab pots, trashed and jugular. Around my neck, I strung more styrofoam than limpet shells could sink or my arms hold. And all along that surf, I was alone, except for everything. I caught the scents of earth's far flesh, musks of the clean hordes. then greasy through my pelt. I felt my guts lean inland toward the penance without words. Joe, take us home.
Oh, thanks for those, Paul. Wonderful. This has been a lot of fun. I'm so pleased to have been a part of it. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Jessica, and Literary Arts. I'm just going to read one poem here. The title poem from my book, When We Were Birds. And the title of the poem is My Son Asks for the Story About When We Were Birds. And that comes from one night years ago. I sat down by my son on his bed, and he was almost half asleep already. I said, "Do you want me to tell a story?" And he said, yeah, tell me the story about when we were birds. And so I tried to kind of tell a story that night. And then the next morning turned it in to this poem, or, the first draft of this poem. It took more than one draft, but so this is called My Son Asks for the Story About When We Were Birds. When we were birds, we veered and wheeled, we flapped and looped. It's true, we flew. When we were birds, we dined on tiny silver fish and the watery hearts of flowers. When we were birds, we sistered the dragonfly, brothered the nightwise bat, and sometimes when we were birds, we rose as high as we could go, light, cold, and strange. And when we opened our beaked mouths, sundown poured like wine down our throats. When we were birds, we worshiped trees, rivers, mountains, sage nuts, rain, gizzard rocks, grub shot dung piles, and like all good beasts and wise green things, the mothering sun. We had many gods when we were birds, and each in her own way was good to us, even winter fog, which found us huddling in salal or silk tassel, singing low, sweet songs and closing our blood-rich eyes and sleeping the troubled sleep of birds. Yes, even when we were birds, we were sometimes troubled and tired, sad for no reason, and so pretended we were not birds, and fell like stones, the earth hurtling up to meet us, our trussed bones readying to be shattered, our unusually large hearts pounding for nothing. Yet at the last minute, we would flap and lift, and as we flew shudderingly away, we told ourselves that this falling we would remember. We thought we would always be birds. We didn't know. We didn't know we could love one another with such ferocity that we should. Thanks.